We all do better when we all do better.
You are now listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with your host, George Valenzuela.
This is education coach George Valenzuela. Welcome to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast, where I provide all educators, whether instructional leaders or teachers, tips on how to be their best both personally and professionally. Now let's get into it. We are here today with my very good friend, James Fester. James is an entrepreneur, an instructional coach, a national faculty of PBL Works, and one of the greatest people I know. How are you?
I'm doing very well, George. Thank you so much.
I love that you excel in three major areas of your life. Number one, you put family first. Two, you're a kick-ass entrepreneur like myself. And three, you're passionate about public lands, including national parks. Before we get into how you do each of these three things at a high level, tell us about yourself.
My name is James Fester, as George said. I'm an educator and a writer. I'm a public lands advocate. I began my career in education in the classroom in California, classroom teacher for about a decade there before I eventually moved out to the Midwest. Now I live in Minnesota in the Twin Cities with my wife and my two children. There are a lot of different things that I do. I still work every day with educators, much like you, George, helping them become the best version of themselves they can in service of their students. It's great work. I'm very honored to be able to do that. I also do a lot of writing, which I, of course, am going to come out and blame George for right out of the gate, because George, in addition to being a great friend and the other things, it's also a co-author with me on our first book, my first book, and that we wrote together for ISTE on environmental science and project-based learning, which was a great thing to be able to do. And I've been able to continue writing and do that more and more, using that book as a springboard. I'm a master trainer for UNESCO's Asia arm, the Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Education and Sustainable Living. I get to work with international educators as well, helping to support them as they grow and perfect their craft.
James and I met in late 2014. We were both part of the national faculty at the Buck Institute for Education, where we were part of the unicorns cohort. Big shout out to all the unicorns if they're listening.
Absolutely.
We have been really good friends since then. And as James mentioned, we co-wrote a book on environmental science and project-based learning, or PBL. What a lot of people don't know is that James inspired me back in 2016 at Angels Island in San Francisco. James kicked off a tour in front of Immigration Station, and I remember being amazed at how knowledgeable he was about the landmark and telling myself, you need to explain your work as good as this guy does. You are one of the best, my friend. From your perspective, how has our relationship evolved since then? And where are we today?
We were both a part of a really fantastic cohort of educators, most of whom we still are friends with and collaborate with to this day. And I remember one thing about being a part of that cohort is it was very grounding, because a lot of the work you do as a consultant now is you in a part of the country where maybe you don't know anybody else. And so you need to have some sort of grounding community so you can go off and do that work and then come back to a collaborative group that can help you talk about your experiences, and so you can stay and feel connected. And for us, I think that's really what the Unicorn Group was, is that we were all doing the same work together and we all had similar passions and values. And it was really helpful. We were able to be better in service of educators because of our group. I remember for a while, I was working part-time for PBL Works when the Buck Institute became PBL Works, and so were you. And then you called me up one day and said, here it is, and they have interest in doing a book about environmental science. And I remember I said, I can't wait to read that book. And you're like, well, no, I'm calling to ask you to write it with me. I was like, wait, me? Which is so funny too, because I'd always enjoyed writing. I loved using it as a vehicle for not just self-improvement, but for sharing ideas and getting them out there for people to be able to benefit from them as well. But I'd never thought about what it would look like for me to write a book, because I didn't know the first thing about it. So that was a big shift, I think, in our relationship, was that you took me under your wing and kind of showed me this is how one goes about writing a book, which was a big departure from what I was doing, which was, I think, an occasional blog post or something. This is how you get on a writing schedule. This is how you set the beginning up so that you make sure that everything flows together. This is how you make sure that you are providing strategies that are action out of the gate, so teachers don't feel as though they read a book for 2 hours and then walk away with more work to do. And I think that was, the biggest takeaway that I got from you. And it's something that anybody who's familiar with your writing knows. You read any of your writing for an hour, you're coming away with an hour's worth of strategies, not an hour's worth of stories or hours worth of homework that you then need to do. And I think that's something I learned from you. And then from there, I have also really been very fortunate to have your advice in trying to put out my own work and make connections in my own area as an ed entrepreneur, trying to service of connecting teachers and their students with public lands and other things that I'm knowledgeable of and helpful. There's still a lot that I don't know, and you've always been a very readily available and willing partner and font of information, which is great. So that's the evolution, I think, of our relationship and our friendship.
This is the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast. On this podcast, we interview people who are excelling in 3 major areas of their lives so that we can learn from them and experience similar success. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify or iTunes, please hit the subscribe button, please hit the like button, and share this episode with your family, friends, and colleagues who are interested in self-improvement through lifelong learning. And now for a word from one of our sponsors.
We had the pleasure of listening to George this morning on project-based learning, and he shared his story that his aunt encouraged him to go into education. And she was absolutely right. He is so talented at sharing information in a way that is easy to digest and is inspiring to go back and actually implement and make change.
So my takeaway is that Mr. Valenzuela was very inspiring. He was very motivational and helped me to think about a new way of getting my teachers excited.
When I set out to do a workshop, my key deliverable is energy. And this momentum is used to make connections, inspire, educate, and ultimately transform the audience so that they're compelled to take that same energy back to their schools and communities. And although we have fun, we tackle the hard topics of today, like educational policy, pedagogy for improving curriculum and instruction, and empowering today's students by connecting our work to the needs of the workforce. So please consider Lifelong Learning Defined for your next keynote, workshop, or conference, and overall instructional and educational coaching needs. My name is George, and I hope to connect with you soon.
We would love to have him come and do some work with us and help us be a little more successful and help our students to be more successful.
Are technology issues slowing you down at your school? If that's the case, look no further than 5-Star Technology's Virtual Help Desk. Their team of experts are available to support you remotely, resolving up to 40% of common issues, like password resets, device connectivity, and lots more. With just a few clicks, you'll have access to their live chat from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. Just enter your email to get started. Then you'll live chat with one of 5-Star's EdTech experts to diagnose your problem. And if their virtual help desk agent can't solve the issue completely, they will dispatch the ticket to your school's on-site tech team. Let 5-Star Technology Solutions be your support partner. Experience their virtual help desk, which is affordable, efficient, and always there for you. Please contact them at 5startech.com/contact us. Once again, 5startech.com/contact us. And for your convenience, you'll find this link in the episode show notes. James, tell us about your beautiful family.
I'm incredibly fortunate to be married to a wonderful woman named Julie, who is also the reason I now live in Minnesota. She's an amazing educator in her own right. She has a wealth of experience in education. She's worked in admissions at the college level. She's worked as an outdoor educator. She's an ECE educator. And I'm really fortunate. She's also a fantastic partner, not just when it comes to our 2 wonderful daughters who are ages 4 and 16 months now. We have this great partnership. I think that's so important in any relationship, but especially in a marriage. I think you really need somebody who's going to be looking out for you so that you can also look out for them as well.
James, what would you tell a person who is struggling to connect with his or her spouse?
The first thing that I would say is, when's the last time that you made time for yourself and for your spouse? It is very easy. And I think a lot of people that have kids can understand this. I'll bet you could identify with this, that there's always something to do that involves the kids, a place they have to go, a need that they met, something that they have to tell you. And it's very hard to carve out time for just you and your wife, your partner, your spouse, whoever that is. At the end of the day, sometimes you're just very tired and you got the kids down, you've had a long day. And now you're going to sit down and talk finances or plan out the rest of the meals for the week? Probably
It
not.
doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work that
No,
way.
it doesn't always work that way, especially in a job like ours. You've spent all day beholden and in service of other people, and you really need some time for yourself. And sometimes that time is at night. You need to check in with yourself and say, can I be connected to people more like right
Right.
now, or do I need to find another time to do it? Our best conversations are when we are driving somewhere on a road trip. So that's
Mm.
actually what we do is every once in a while when we feel like we really need to hash something out, we'll throw the kids in the back seat. We'll turn some CD of children's songs, Raffi or something like that, so that they can tune out, and then we will just talk this out. And a lot of times, like big decisions, financial decisions, ones that involve plans for the holidays, talked out on these road trips. That's our mechanism for staying connected and being sure that we're both being responsive to each other and communicating well.
And that's a really great strategy. I also realize that having a deep conversation at the end of the day in front of the TV with my wife, it doesn't really work. But when she
Mm-hmm.
accompanies me out to DC, out to Maryland, when I'm working out there
Mm-hmm.
every month, I do realize that we get a lot done. We get a lot accomplished and we align a lot of our thoughts, our plans, and the things
Mm-hmm.
that we know we need to do. That's really a great strategy. And now for a word from one of our sponsors. If you're a STEM and PBL teacher like me, you're always on the lookout for new project ideas and resources. You know George does PBL, and I'm telling you, look no further than SmartLab. SmartLab really has a fresh take on STEM and PBL. I'm proud to be a partner, and they sponsor the podcast. But just don't take my word for it. Check out what other educators are saying about SmartLab.
When students enter into SmartLab, they are allowed to think outside of traditional norms.
It gives them a lot of agency. They feel empowered and important. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the SmartLab environment and the way the project process is set up.
SmartLab becomes this place where they can do those things and have the time and space to like communicate better and even like deal with social emotional stuff. Like they're having a bad day, a SmartLab's a place where we can change the pace of what they're learning to match their mental needs for the day. And that comes back tenfold later on when they want to be there and they want to learn and they want to do stuff and they feel safe and they feel like they can get the things they need.
That's one of the big benefits of being in more of a collaborative environment is it makes you have to work. It makes you have to be accountable.
Please look in this episode's show notes for a link to connect with SmartLab. Let's transition into your coaching work. How did you get into coaching educators?
When I started out in education as a classroom teacher, that is where I thought I was going to spend my entire career. I really did. I had two parents that were public school teachers. They have 65 years of experience between the two of them. And I very much saw myself going into what I like to jokingly call family business. Get into a classroom as soon as I could, put in my 45 plus years as a classroom teacher, at the same school probably, and then move on and be happy with a life well spent. That was what I wanted to do. There wasn't a moment when I said, now I want to go into coaching. Now I want to go into instructional support. Now I want to go into technology. They were things that I had some aptitude for. And then my colleagues started to see what I was doing and would come over and ask me more about that. And I would just informally share what I was doing, show them what's going on. If one of them who didn't have an aptitude for technology was having trouble with their computer, I became the go-to guy to help them out with that. I discovered that I enjoyed supporting teachers as much as I enjoyed supporting students in their learning. It also was an area of growth for me as well. After 10 years in the classroom, I by no means knew everything, but I had learned a lot and I wanted to kind of branch out and explore another area. There was an opportunity for instructional coaching in my district that the leadership wanted, that kind of were floating towards me as something they wanted to see me do more full-time instead of piecemeal. I was really torn about it because I didn't want to lose that classroom connection. I fully intend to go back to the classroom someday too, being completely transparent here. It's going to happen.
In my coaching contracts, I work with administrators, I work with teachers, but there's also space for modeling with kids. I've done that in Sacramento,
You do that.
I've done that in Maryland and Illinois. Part of that is for that reason as a teacher. And I think any successful coach can relate. We've gotten better as teachers after having to learn for adults, but in reality, we oftentimes weren't as great back then as we are now. And that's always a regret for most people that do what we do. but now I get to
Yeah.
also do it with kids. And
Yeah.
so that's the way you do it.
There you go. And it's so smart too, because there is something to be said about keeping that connection to what it feels like and looks like to be in a classroom, not just be of service to the area I'm in, but also to remind myself a little bit of, oh yeah, this is what that feels like. But I love your answer as well. That's really awesome.
James, coaching adults isn't always easy. What's one piece of advice that you would give someone who's just starting out?
This is one that I actually learned, believe it or not, as a summer camp counselor. For like 20 plus years, I worked as a summer camp counselor. Like from the time I still was a kid, I was a counselor for students, for kids at summer camp. And one thing that I learned, especially with dealing with, and this was with dealing with adults in general, but a lot of times parents, first time parents sending their little kids away to camp would get very anxious. Communication with parents, especially first-time parents, is always really important when you're working at a sleepover camp. They want to know things. Sometimes the kids will act out in ways that need to be brought to the attention of the parent, be it homesickness or different behaviors. A lot of times I would call a parent and say, and have to report something that was going on with their kid, that they were having trouble getting through something, or they were acting out in a way that was very different than how they were at home. And of course, the parent would push back immediately and be, "No, my kid doesn't do that at home." That would create a relationship that was adversarial from the get-go. What we were always told was make sure that even if what you are hearing from the other person, the adult, is in stark contrast to the facts of the matter, that they're in denial to a certain extent, you want to make sure they know from the get-go that you've heard what they've said. The sentence stem that I use all the time is, wow, that's really great to know and hear, because that's different than what I'm seeing right now. What that did was affirmed what they're telling you was true. Kids act different at home than they do when they're away from their parents. It let them know that they had been heard, that there was respect there, that I wasn't telling them, no, you're wrong, actually, I'm right. It kept the bridge open and it made it more of a partnership. In my work with teachers, sometimes I will suggest a strategy. I will suggest a change, a revision, a piece of feedback, and they will push back on it. And they say, no, I don't think that's going to work for me. That's not going to work for my students. That's the same thing that I say, because maybe what I think will work well for them, maybe will work differently for them. And I say, that's really great to hear. I appreciate you letting me know about that. Why do you think it won't work? Or what would you need in order to be able to try this in your own classroom? You're affirming that they're right. You are maintaining the partnership, and then you are moving forward with trying to find a solution. And it's something that I feel is really important for coaches, because as we know, so much of coaching is relationship based. It all starts with the relationship. And you don't want to get into a situation where it becomes adversarial, or you're not listening to me, or I just said that this won't work. It sets a really great tone for future interaction.
That's really great advice, James. Speaking with lots of instructional coaches, pushback is really becoming the norm. And what you just said totally disarms someone and creates a partnership. And that's really what coaching is all about. It's a partnership. You know something, they know something, and you come together and you create some synergy. Fantastic. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify or iTunes, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button and share this episode with your family, friends, and colleagues who are interested in self-improvement through lifelong learning. Now let's talk about your passion for public lands, including national parks. James, please tell the audience what makes a land public and what is a national park?
It's so funny that I've been working with national parks for a really long time and visited public lands all over the country, and no one's ever asked me that question before. So I'm feeling some pressure here that I really do a good job with this definition. So public lands are, at least they're a global phenomenon. They're by no means something that we only have here in the United States. But in the United States, public lands are land that is held in trust and is managed by the government on behalf of the people who own it. So you, George, and I, and all of your listeners, as residents of this country, as citizens, we all own these vast tracts of land that is used for all sorts of different things and comes over all sorts of destinations. We're talking national forests, we're talking wilderness areas, wildlife refuges, and of course, state and national parks. While the government, the state government or the federal government, they manage the lands, they maintain roads, they make sure that forest fires are fought, they do all of that. They do so on our behalf because we are collective owners. So it's different from a piece of land that your house might be on, where you are the owner and you are in charge of making all the decisions. They manage them in trust with us. Sometimes they ask, sometimes we give opinions about what things can and could be done. Meantime, a lot of these lands are used for the extraction of minerals, gas and oil or timber, and they manage all of those things with the idea that these are communal resources that we all own and should be for the benefit of all people, and that they're the ones that do that on our behalf. Hopefully that makes sense.
I did not know that, but that makes a lot of sense. How did public lands become your passion?
You know this, and as your listeners have probably gathered by now, I spend a lot of time outdoors, and the outdoors are a passion of mine that I'm sure a lot of other people have as well. As young as when I can remember, we would go camping, we would go on road trips. These are the things that we did as a family. They've always held an important place in my life. They're places of recreation, they're places of learning, they're places where you can go connect with cultural or natural areas that are, in some cases, one of a kind. They're places where you can just go and maybe lose yourself for a little while. You don't need to worry about the tweets that are coming in or the messages on your phone. A lot of times you get cut off from that, which I think is also really healthy. You can go to a place and you can look out at it, and you can just be in awe of how big or how amazing it is, and be reminded that all of those problems in your life, all of those challenges compared to a giant sequoia or the majesty of the Grand Canyon, they're really a lot more insignificant than maybe you feel like they are. I think that's healthy, to be reminded that you're just a small part of a larger community ecosystem world. That's a really good and healthy thing to be reminded of.
I think because of social media, people who are traveling are looking to explore public lands and parks a lot more. Which 3 parks would you say is a must-see for every American or tourist?
It's interesting that you mentioned social media, because there's a love-hate relationship with social media when it comes to public lands, that it's a great way to discover places that maybe they would never know existed. But it also means that these places become even more popular and get even more overrun in ways that they haven't yet. And I think it's a big balancing act, trying to figure out how to balance the good with the bad in that. But if I was going to name 3 places that I would highly recommend everybody go be present in at some point in their life, which is a really hard ask because there's 425 individual units in our national parks. The ones that you need to go to, I think, are ones that, unless you're physically standing there, there's no way that a picture, a movie, any kind of media is going to really capture the feel of a place. The one that I would say right off the top would be the Grand Canyon. And it's not just me. We've had former presidents say that it's the one thing that every American needs to go and see. It's a place that, until you are standing there and feeling the enormity of it, you just really don't get it. I remember when I took my wife there the first time, we were heading there, and the whole week up to it, she didn't look at pictures. She didn't want to look at videos because she was afraid she was going to ruin it for herself. And I thought that was really funny. And I told her, I was like, nah, don't worry. Look at all the pictures you want, because it's not going to matter. So the Grand Canyon would be one. Another one that I would tell people that they really have to go see, I would actually say in South Florida in the Everglades. The reason I say that is because, like many of our other national parks, it's one that is under constant threat from factors like climate change. In the next decade or so, I think it's going to be a very different place, just because of things like sea level rise and saltwater intrusion and things like that. I would highly encourage people to see that one. The third one, and I'm very biased here because I spent weeks and weeks of my life in it, would be Yosemite in California. I jokingly refer to it as my backyard. I'm really excited that hopefully in a few weeks, I'll be taking my own kids there for the first time. There really isn't any other place like it. And the feeling of when you drive into the valley and the trees clear and it's just soaring granite cliffs on each side of you, like this giant cathedral. Every time I've taken people there, they all have the same reaction, which is just, whoa. And I don't think there's a lot of things nowadays that can give you that, whoa, kind of feeling. So I'd highly encourage everyone to check that place out as well.
Everyone listening, make sure you think about the Grand Canyon, the Everglades in Florida, and Yosemite in California. We are now winding down with James, and we're going to get into the quick fire question round segment of the show. James, what are your 3 top ed tech tools?
Padlet. I think it's a great way to crowdsource ideas and to get people participating when they don't maybe feel comfortable speaking out. I also love Google Keep, which is a seldom used app in the App Suite that helps you keep track of tasks collaboratively. My third one would be ScreenFlow. It's a video editing platform that is really easy to use, and I use it all of the time to create really awesome content.
James, what's your favorite education book other than yours?
yours hasn't arrived yet, sir, so I can't say yours because I haven't read it yet. But you should have interviewed me next week. The book that I'd like to give a shout out for is actually one that's written by a colleague of ours, Maggie Lee McHugh. She just published, I want to say about a month or two ago, Bringing Project-Based Learning to Life in Mathematics by Corwin.
I read that one.
Did you read that one? I
Maggie?
am almost done with it. And you and I both know that in PBL, math is sometimes a stick wicket. It's not impossible to do. It just works a little bit differently. And I think Maggie, with all of her experience, she does a fantastic job of breaking it down for math teachers. So I would suggest everybody check that one out because it's good for everybody, but it's especially good if you're a math teacher.
James, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best piece of advice that I ever received was actually given to me by my mother, interestingly enough. And it was, make sure at some point you give back. If all anybody did was take and take and take, there would be nothing left for anybody else. And so it reminds me that we all have a responsibility as coaches, as educators, as human beings, to make sure that whatever we've benefited from, be it ideas, be it financial success, be it experiences of any kind, that we have the obligation to make sure that we are passing that on and leaving things for the next group of people to come after us.
That is really great advice from Mama Fester. James, I picked 3 things I love and respect about you. And just to recap, you put family first, you're a great coach, and you're passionate about public lands. For all the listeners out there, what are you working on next?
I'm very fortunate to be working on my second book with ISTE, and it's my first solo title. It's going to be focused on adapting the educational resources and approaches used at national parks for the benefit of classroom teachers. That is what I'm currently working on. It is, as writing is exactly what John Muir described it as, just like a glacier, an eternal grind. But it's really a wonderful project. I'm really excited for people to get to check it out. And yeah, that is what is currently top of list for me.
This is the part of the show where I give you your flowers. I don't believe in waiting until someone's gone to tell them how I feel about them. James, you are a wonderful and kind man. You have a lot to offer the world. You help a lot of people, lots of educators all around the world. I think you're an exceptional husband, father, friend, son, and overall human being. I am proud to know you. I don't tell everyone this, but I love you, and I'm so glad we're friends.
Well, thank you so much for saying all of those incredibly kind things. I could absolutely say them back and pass them back to you tenfold as well. I really appreciate getting to hear that from you. I respect you a ton, and so coming from you, it means that much more. So thank you so much.
All right, let's put this in the universe. How can people contact you, not just in Minnesota, not just in California, but all over the world, so James can come and coach, do PBL workshops, and help them understand public lands?
Of course, my email address, which is available in the show notes. That's a great way to connect with me. You can also check me out on my website, which is festeredu.com. Another way that you can get connected with me is on the website for my current project, which is nationalparkclassroom.com. Any educator, any human being that is passionate about their public lands and want to learn more about how to connect learners to them is welcome to that website. And those are the best ways to get a hold of me. And I certainly hope to hear from some of your listeners soon.
That's it for this episode. Until next time, this is the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with George Valenzuela.